First Kings chapter 5. We're still in the Solomon era. He is the last king of the United Kingdom. His term lasted 40 years. His father, King David, served 40 years. The first king of Israel, who was Saul, served 40 years. So the kingdom of Israel was united for 120 years. After the death of Solomon, we will learn that his son Rehoboam took over. And during Rehoboam's term, there was a civil war, and the 10 northern tribes separated and got their own king by the name of Jeroboam. Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, continued on as king over Judah and Benjamin. And you may think, well, just 2 tribes? That doesn't seem like much. It was much, because Judah was the largest of all of the tribes. It also had the city of Jerusalem, which had, of course, the temple. And that's what we'll be looking at tonight in chapter 5. David really wanted to build the temple. King David, the father of Solomon. God would not allow it because David was a warrior. He wanted the temple to be built during peacetime. The first temple that Solomon built was about 1,000 years before Jesus was born. It was built or started in the year 966 BC. It took 7 years to build. As I said, David really wanted the temple. He loved the Lord so much. And we have his words in Psalm 132 about how he really wanted to see this built. Psalm 132, starting with verse number 3, these are the words of David. I will not enter my house or go to my bed. I will not sleep to my eyes or slumber to my eyelids till I find a place for the Lord, a dwelling for the mighty one of Jacob. And that was David's goal. He wanted God to have a place to dwell. And of course, since the time of Moses, the children of Israel worshipped in a tabernacle, which is a very fragile, portable building, which was a glorified tent, a very beautiful building made of the finest of materials, but it was designed for the wilderness experience while they were coming from Egypt into the Promised Land. You remember wandering around those 40 years in the wilderness? And so it was centerpiece. It was right in the middle of wherever they camped. And then all of the tribes had assignments of where they would camp around this. And I think that's very significant that the worship was the center of everything. But now the children of Israel, and especially Solomon, David, they noticed that the nations around them with their false gods had some beautiful temples. And they wanted a beautiful place for Jehovah. And I think one of the reasons that God wanted a man of peace, who was Solomon, to build it instead of a warrior like David, even though he loved David dearly, was that he wanted the temple to be a symbol of peace for all nations. And you're going to notice as we look at who built the temple that it was not only constructed by the labor of Jewish people, but also Gentile people. So it is with the gospel. The gospel includes everybody of all different types of backgrounds. The non-Jews not only provided workers, but they gave money on the building. For example, David raised money for the building before he died. He finally raised, along with contributions that were given to him by Gentiles, he raised 4,050 tons of gold. He also raised, with the help of non-Jews, over 38,000 tons of silver, not counting the bronze that was also collected. David gave Solomon the plans of the temple because God gave the plans of the temple to David. So it was David then who did a lot of the planning. He had the blueprint. He collected the 4,000 tons of gold, 38,000 tons of silver. He assembled the artisans. And that's where a lot of the Gentiles came in. The skilled workers who would be artisans and even laborers in wood and stone. David and a good friend of his who was a Phoenician, a Gentile, by the name of Hiram of Tyre, was the one who was going to provide the timber for the temple. And Solomon had a good goal in mind. Solomon said, "This will not be a monument to my father, but it'll be a temple for our God." Look at verse 5 of chapter 5, where Solomon said these words, "I intend, therefore, to build a temple for the name of the Lord my God, as the Lord told my father David when he said, 'Your son, whom I will put on the throne in your place, will build the temple for my name.'" And it's interesting that one of the master artisans, Huram-Abi, Huram, Abi, from 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 13 and 14, we learn that he was the son of a mixed marriage. And he was the head artisan, the master artisan. He came from a mixed marriage. His mother was a Jew, and his father was a Phoenician. Now, everybody that's been a leader here, and even members here, know that building projects are not easy. They're exciting. They're expensive. It takes a lot of hard work, but they're not easy. And it wasn't always easy on the work of the temple. But King David helped so much in paving the way for it to go smoothly. Now, since I've been at Sharondale, I've been in 2 building programs, and I've always been amazed at how hard the people work physically and how well this congregation gave financially to the work. When I first moved here, the Sharondale Church of Christ building, which was dedicated in 1941, had tar paper siding, and then an addition was put on it made of stucco, and then there was a room added on for where they got rid of the old coal stove. They added a room on, and it was made of cement blocks. So it had 3 different types of exterior. And I kept saying, let's do something to make it look uniform. Let's put some siding on it or do something. And everybody, I guess I was only 28 years old when I moved here, and they listened, but that's about it. And finally, a man came along in his older years and became a deacon here. It was the father of Melita Cool. And we were sitting in an officers' meeting. In those days, when we sat in an officers' meeting, it wasn't around a table in one of the rooms that we have over at the classroom wing, but the chairman of the elders, like Mike would sit in a chair here, and all the rest of us would sit in the pews in the front of the church. And usually it'd be on a Sunday afternoon that we would meet. And Melita's dad was seated there in the pew not long after he was ordained as a deacon. And he said, before I die, I can remember his words, it's as clear as can be. Before I die, I'd like to see this building wrapped in brick. And I thought, wow, that is great. You know, I was just thinking of some kind of aluminum siding or vinyl siding, but he said brick. And you know what was even more amazing? Everybody said, yeah, great idea, wonderful idea. I don't know what it was when I brought it up, but it went, and it went good. And Melita's dad said, and I'll put the first $1,000 on it. And that always gets people's attention. So one thing led to another. We didn't only wrap the old building in brick, but we added a classroom wing to it and wrapped it in brick. And then back about, let's see, this was done in 2009, so that would have been how many years? 16 years ago, our attendance was running about 170 in the old building. We thought, well, we need to do something else. So then this building was envisioned. And me and Howard stepped it out to see how, if it would fit on this lot well, and I had some ideas about what I'd like to see. And I had this idea about everybody being brought closer instead of a long building, and that's why we have a semicircle here now. I like the idea of a hall all the way around the church, and Shibby, our contractor, Shibby Carnes, had put all of this in the design. And Shibby and Betty came up with so many wonderful ideas, and the building turned out to be so much more beautiful than I even imagined it would be. And I can remember one time when the building wasn't quite finished, and the old building didn't have enough lighting in it, and it was kind of dark. And Betty said to me, do you think you're going to have enough lights in the building? I said, well, do you think 160 will be enough? And it did. It turned out to be enough. And so they thought of all kind of things, and all along the way, everything turned out so much even more beautiful than I even imagined because of other people's vision. Even though I would like to see in the building, I never even envisioned something this beautiful. So it's a lot of work. It takes a lot of money. And as you go, there's a lot of different ideas of what should be done. And that makes it sometimes very difficult. But we've always been very blessed by having people who would compromise and not insist that their own way would reign. So Isaiah said in chapter 56 and verse 7 of his book that this temple was to be a house of prayer for all nations. Now, for some reason, the Jewish people didn't get the vision. God set them apart of all the nations of the world. Everybody else in the world were idol worshipers. He set them apart through their father Abraham, the father of the Hebrew nation, to follow only Jehovah God. For some reason they felt that Jehovah God was their God and not everybody's. But some people did launch out. And because of it, there were Gentile people who were very impressed with the religion of Jehovah and the religion of the Jews. And so it did become a house of prayer for all nations. And we need to have that same kind of vision. We see in chapter 5 and verses 11 to 13 a divine message. And I'd like to read that. If you have your Bibles, follow along with me. Chapter 5, verses 11 to 13. Let's see if I got the right chapter here. I hope so. And no, let's go to chapter 6. And I'll close with this tonight because this is very important. This has to do with God, keeping God's laws, not just building a building, but doing God's will. So let's turn to chapter 6 and start with verse 11. The word of the Lord came to Solomon. As for this temple you are building, if you follow my decrees, observe my laws, and keep all my commands and obey them, I will fulfill through you the promise I gave to David your father. And I will live among the Israelites and will not abandon my people Israel. Everything that God does for us is conditional. We talk about covenants, testaments. Those are all agreements. And the Jewish people made an agreement with God that they would love Him, obey Him, and follow Him. And as long as they did that, they were blessed. You and I as Christians, the day we step forward, confess the Lord as Savior, were baptized into Christ, we made a covenant with God to obey Him and love Him. And as long as we do that, we're blessed. Those of you on Wednesday night who come faithfully and have for years know that that is true. So let's keep that in mind. It doesn't matter how beautiful our buildings, how great our program, or how big the attendance, or how wonderful the music ever gets to be, and I think it's great now. What matters is, are we obeying the Lord? Are we more than just a church attenders? Are we disciples of Christ? And as long as we do that, God is going to bless us as well. And we too will be a light unto the world. All right, we'll close now. Is there any announcements that I do have one, and you can have some as well.